Welcome to Relation Tales. Please like this video and subscribe Relation Tales that we're grateful for each and every one of you. Let us know where in the world you're tuning in from. We'd love to hear from you in the comments. Let's begin. Ethan Blake adjusted his tie in the rearview mirror, a rare grin tugging at his lips. It wasn't often that he could duck out of work early, but today was special. Just a week until the wedding, his wedding. And he wanted to surprise Isabel with a new itinerary he had planned for their honeymoon. A secluded beach, candlelit dinners, and nothing but them and the sound of waves. Perfect. He unlocked the front door of their shared townhouse and stepped inside. His smile faltered immediately. Isabel stood in the foyer, her silhouette framed by the dim evening light streaming through the blinds. She was dressed to perfection, a sleek black cocktail dress clinging to her curves, pearl earrings glinting faintly, and heels he'd never seen before. She froze when she saw him, her hands clenched around the strap of an overnight bag sitting by her feet. A flicker of panic crossed her face, her lips parting as though she'd been caught mid-sentence. "You're home early," she said, her voice tight, almost accusing. Ethan frowned, confused. "Yeah, I wanted to surprise you," he said, moving closer. "What's all this? Did I forget a dinner date or something?" For a moment, Isabel just stared at him. Then she forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "No, you didn't forget anything. I didn't think you'd be here." Ethan reached out and touched her arm, his concern growing. "Izzy, what's going on? Are you okay?" He gestured to the bag. "Are you going somewhere?" She flinched at the question, stepping back. "Ethan, we need to talk." That phrase, those 4 words dropped like lead in the pit of his stomach. "Talk about what?" His voice hardened as unease crept into his tone. Her composure cracked. She glanced at the floor and then back up, her eyes glistening. I'm going away for the weekend. I need some time to think." "To think?" Ethan's mind reeled. "Think about what? About us? The wedding?" "Isabel, you're not making any sense." She fumbled for words, her polished exterior dissolving into raw nerves. "It's not like that," she whispered. I need this." Ethan stepped back, the distance between them now vast despite the 2 feet separating them. "You're not going alone, are you?" His words came out sharper than he intended, laced with an accusation he hadn't quite dared to voice yet. Isabel's silence was deafening. It hit him all at once, the truth slamming into him like a freight train. The cocktail dress, the overnight bag, the way she wouldn't meet his eyes. "Who is he?" he demanded, his voice rising. Isabel shook her head frantically. "Ethan, please." "Who is he?" he roared, his fists clenching at his sides. "Isabel, look at me and tell me the truth." Tears streamed down her cheeks now, smudging her mascara. "It's not like you think," she sobbed. "He's just a friend. Someone I've been talking to." "A friend?" Ethan laughed bitterly, the sound harsh and hollow. "You're leaving your fiancé a week before the wedding to spend a weekend with some friend? Do you hear yourself?" She crumpled under the weight of his words, her shoulders shaking. "I didn't know how to tell you," she whispered. "I thought if I wrote you a note, it would be easier." "A note?" Ethan's fury burned hotter. He grabbed a notepad and pen from the side table and slammed it down in front of her. "Go ahead then. Write it. Write me the damn note that explains why my fiancé is running off with another man." Isabel stared at the notepad as though it were a loaded gun. Her trembling hands picked up the pen, and she scribbled something hastily. Ethan snatched it away the moment she put the pen down. One sentence stared back at him. "Next week, I start a new chapter of my life, and I have to do this before it's too late." He read it over 3 times, each word carving a deeper wound. "A new chapter?" His voice cracked. "What does that even mean? Were you going to tell me about him? Or just leave me standing at the altar while you ran off with your friend?" Isabel tried to grab his arm, but he pulled away. "Ethan, please," she begged. "It's not like that. His name," Ethan said coldly. "Tell me his name." She hesitated, her lips trembling. "Tell me his name, Isabel, or so help me, you're walking out that door for good." Finally, she broke. "Marcus. Marcus Fletcher." The name hit Ethan like a punch to the gut. "Your boss," he spat. "That arrogant, married bastard who could be your father's?" Isabel's sobs grew louder, but Ethan didn't care. His world had shattered, and all that remained was rage and betrayal. He knew in that moment he couldn't let this go. He wouldn't let her walk away unscathed. If she wanted to destroy their future, he'd make sure she paid dearly for it. As Isabel crumbled before him, Ethan's mind raced, already plotting his revenge. Ethan stood motionless, staring at the shattered pieces of his life scattered around him. His fiancée, no, his ex-fiancée, sat on the floor a trembling, sobbing mess, while her confession echoed in his mind. Marcus Fletcher, her boss, a man she had chosen over the life they were supposed to build together. He clenched his fists, his nails digging into his palms. He wanted to scream, to smash everything in sight, to cry. But more than anything, he wanted revenge. Not just for himself, but for every ounce of trust and love she had thrown away like garbage. "Get out," Ethan said, his voice low and dangerous. Isabel's head snapped up, her eyes wide and bloodshot. "Ethan, please. Let me explain." "There's nothing left to explain. You made your choice." He pointed toward the door. "Now leave. Take your bag and get out of my house." Her lips quivered. "But where will I go?" "I don't care." Ethan snapped, his tone cold enough to freeze fire. "Go to him. Isn't that what you were planning to do anyway?" Isabel hesitated, her hands fumbling with the straps of her bag. I never wanted to hurt you." "Then you shouldn't have betrayed me," Ethan said. "You knew exactly what you were doing, Isabel. You made your bed. Go lie in it." Her sobs turned to quiet whimpers as she picked up the bag and walked toward the door. She paused for a moment, looking back over her shoulder. "Ethan, don't," he interrupted, his voice sharp as a blade. "Just leave." She opened the door and stepped out into the night. Ethan slammed it shut behind her and locked it, leaning his forehead against the wood. His chest heaved, his breathing ragged. For a long moment, he stayed like that, letting the silence of the empty house wash over him. But the silence didn't bring peace. It brought anger, and with anger came clarity. Isabel might have left, but this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Ethan didn't sleep that night. Instead, he sat at the kitchen table, staring at the engagement ring he had ripped from Isabel's finger. The diamonds sparkled mockingly under the harsh kitchen light, a cruel reminder of what had been and what could never be. He picked up his phone and scrolled through the contacts until he found the number he was looking for. A few rings later, a gruff voice answered. "Ethan? It's late. What's going on?" "I need your help, Jake." Ethan's voice was steady, but the underlying fury was unmistakable. "Can you come over?" Jake, his oldest friend and a lawyer, didn't hesitate. "Give me 20 minutes. While he waited, Ethan began jotting notes on a notepad. Every detail Isabel had confessed, every interaction he could remember between her and Marcus, every piece of leverage he might be able to use. By the time Jake arrived, Ethan's rage had crystallized into something cold and methodical. Jake took one look at his friend and knew something was wrong. "Talk to me," he said, pulling out a chair. Ethan didn't waste time. He recounted everything, the affair, the lies, the betrayal. By the time he finished, Jake's face was a mix of disbelief and anger. "Jesus, Ethan, that's brutal." Jake leaned back, running a hand through his hair. "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking Marcus Fletcher doesn't get to walk away from this unscathed," Ethan said. "And neither does Isabel. She thought she could ruin my life and just move on? No, not this time." Jake nodded slowly. "All right, what's the plan?" Ethan leaned forward, his eyes blazing. "First, I want to expose them. Publicly. I want everyone to know who they are and what they've done. Marcus has a wife, right?" Jake hesitated. "Yeah, but..." "Then she deserves to know. I'll make sure she finds out. And when I'm done with that, I'll make sure everyone at his office knows what kind of man he is. He won't just lose his wife. He'll lose his reputation, his career, everything." "And Isabel?" Jake asked. Ethan's jaw tightened. "I'll make her regret the day she ever met me." The next morning, Ethan sat in his car outside Marcus Fletcher's sprawling suburban home. He had spent hours tracking down Marcus's wife, Claire, and compiling everything he could find on the affair. Pictures, emails, text messages. Isabel's phone had been a gold mine of incriminating evidence. Claire opened the door, a confused smile on her face. "Can I help you?" "Yes," Ethan said, his voice calm and polite. "I'm Ethan Blake. I believe we have something in common." Claire frowned. "I don't understand." "It's about your husband," Ethan said. "And my fiancé." The color drained from Claire's face. "What are you talking about?" Ethan handed her the envelope. "I think you should see this." She took it with trembling hands, her eyes scanning the contents. With every passing second, her expression shifted, from confusion to horror to rage. When she finally looked up, tears shimmered in her eyes. "I had no idea," she whispered. "I'm sorry," Ethan said, "but I thought you deserved to know." Claire nodded, her jaw tightening. "Thank you." As Ethan walked back to his car, he felt a strange sense of satisfaction. This was just the beginning. Ethan drove away from Claire's house, his grip tight on the steering wheel. He had expected a confrontation, perhaps tears or denial. But the steely determination in her eyes told him one thing. Claire wasn't the type to sit quietly and endure betrayal. His phone buzzed in the cup holder, pulling him from his thoughts. It was a text from Jake. "You sure you want to go through with the next part?" Ethan smirked grimly and typed back, "Absolutely. Let's take him down." The following morning, Ethan walked into Marcus Fletcher's office building. The receptionist barely glanced up, assuming he was just another suit headed to a meeting. But Ethan wasn't there for business. He carried a thick manila envelope, its contents designed to shatter Marcus's carefully constructed world. Inside the envelope were copies of the same damning evidence he had given Claire, along with a letter addressed to Marcus's board of directors. The letter detailed Marcus's inappropriate relationship with an employee under his supervision, an affair that violated company policies and ethical standards. Ethan approached the receptionist with a charming smile. "Hi, could you make sure this gets to the head of HR? It's urgent." She nodded, unsuspecting, and Ethan left before anyone could stop him. That same afternoon, Isabel sat at her desk in her small apartment, scrolling aimlessly through her emails. Since leaving Ethan's house, she had tried to contact him multiple times, but he refused to answer her calls or texts. She had even driven by their townhouse, only to find her belongings dumped unceremoniously on the curb. Her phone buzzed, and she snatched it up, hoping it was Ethan. But it wasn't. The name on the screen sent a chill down her spine. Claire Fletcher. Heart pounding, Isabel hesitated before answering. "Hello. Do you think I'm stupid?" Claire's voice was ice cold. "Claire, save it. You think you can waltz into my husband's life, ruin my marriage, and walk away without consequences?" Isabel's throat went dry. I don't care what you meant," Claire snapped. "You've destroyed everything. But I'll make sure you pay for it. Both of you." The line went dead, leaving Isabel trembling. 2 days later, the storm hit. Marcus Fletcher's name was plastered across local news sites, accompanied by headlines like, "High-level executive at Fletcher & Company, accused of workplace misconduct." Anonymous tips had flooded the media, exposing his affair with an employee nearly half his age. The fallout was swift. Marcus was suspended pending an internal investigation. The board of directors released a statement condemning his behavior, and rumors of his imminent firing began to swirl. Meanwhile, Isabel became the target of public scrutiny. Pictures of her leaving hotels with Marcus surfaced online, along with details of her affair. Her former friends distanced themselves, and whispers followed her everywhere she went. When Isabel showed up to work, she was met with hostile glares and whispered insults. By lunchtime, her boss called her into his office. "I'm sorry, Isabel," he said, avoiding her eyes. "But with everything going on, we have to let you go. It's best for the company." She left the building in tears, her life unraveling faster than she could keep up. Ethan stood in the shadows of a crowded bar, watching Marcus nurse a whiskey at the counter. The man looked disheveled, his usual confident air replaced with a sullen defeat. Ethan approached, his footsteps deliberate. Marcus glanced up, his expression hardening when he recognized him. "You," Marcus sneered. "What the hell do you want?" Ethan smiled, the kind of smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Just wanted to see how you were holding up. Looks like things aren't going so well for you." Marcus slammed his glass down. "You think you've won?" You've ruined my career, my marriage. You ruined your marriage, Ethan interrupted. And your career? That's just collateral damage. Marcus stood, his fists clenched. You don't scare me. Ethan leaned in, his voice low and menacing. Good? Because I'm not done yet. Marcus faltered, uncertainty flickering in his eyes. Enjoy the rest of your drink, Ethan said, turning to leave. It might be the last thing you have to look forward to. Weeks passed, and the chaos began to settle. Marcus's wife, Claire, filed for divorce, taking half of his assets and leaving him a broken man. His career was in ruins, his reputation unsalvageable. Isabel, ostracized and jobless, fled town to escape the relentless judgment. As for Ethan, he began rebuilding his life. He sold the townhouse he had shared with Isabel and moved to a new city, where he started fresh. Months later, he met someone new, Emma, a vibrant and compassionate woman who reminded him that love could be genuine. Their relationship blossomed slowly, built on trust and mutual respect. One evening, as they walked hand in hand along a quiet beach, Ethan paused to watch the sunset. He felt a sense of peace he hadn't known in years. Isabel and Marcus had tried to destroy him, but they had only succeeded in destroying themselves. Ethan had emerged stronger, wiser, and ready to embrace the future. 6 years passed. Ethan had built a new life in another town, leaving the shadows of his past far behind. He married Emma, a woman who grounded him, and they had 2 beautiful children, 4-year-old Ryan Jr. and a baby girl, Lily. Life was everything he had once thought it could never be again, stable, joyful, and full of love. The day began like any other. Ethan and Emma were back in his old hometown for a funeral, a friend from high school who had died a hero overseas. The local square was crowded with familiar faces, most offering bittersweet smiles and condolences. Ethan held Emma's hand tightly, while Ryan Jr. darted around, full of energy after hours in the car. Ryan, Emma called. Don't run too far ahead. Ethan glanced up and froze. There she was, Isabel. The years had been unkind to her. She looked pale and gaunt, her once vibrant beauty dimmed. She clutched a small bag, and her wide, hollow eyes locked onto Ethan's. For a moment, time seemed to stop. Ethan stood frozen, memories of that devastating night flooding back. Isabel hesitated, then stepped forward. Before she could speak, Emma moved between them, her protective instinct sharp. Get away from my family, Emma said, her voice calm but firm. Isabel's mouth opened, but no words came out. She looked at Ethan, her eyes pleading, but he didn't respond. He simply stared at her, silent, his expression unreadable. Let's go, Ethan, Emma said, turning toward their children. She's not worth it. As they walked away, Isabel stood rooted to the spot, tears streaming down her face. She had rehearsed what she might say to Ethan if their paths ever crossed, but now the words seemed meaningless. She watched him disappear into the crowd, her heart heavier than ever. That evening, Ethan and Emma sat on the porch of their hotel, the kids tucked into bed. The summer air was warm, the sound of cicadas filling the silence. Emma reached over and squeezed Ethan's hand. You okay? She asked softly. Ethan nodded. Seeing her again, it stirred up some things. But I'm okay. I have you, and I have our family. That's all that matters. Emma smiled and rested her head on his shoulder. You're a good man, Ethan. You didn't let the past define you. He thought about Isabel, her haunted expression, the way she had looked like a shadow of the person he had once loved. He didn't feel anger or bitterness anymore. He felt pity. She made her choices, Ethan said. And I made mine. I chose to move forward. Emma kissed his cheek, and they sat together, watching the stars. Ethan realized he had truly let go of the pain. Isabel was a chapter in his life that had ended long ago. Now, he was writing a new story, one filled with hope, love, and the future he deserved. Isabel's life had been a string of bad decisions and consequences she couldn't escape. After leaving town years ago, she had bounced from job to job, unable to shake the stigma of her affair with Marcus. The whispers followed her everywhere, branding her as a homewrecker. Marcus fared no better. Divorced and bankrupt, he spent his days in isolation, drowning his regrets in alcohol. His former colleagues avoided him, and his family had disowned him. His fall from grace was complete. Isabel often thought about Ethan, about the life they could have had if she hadn't thrown it away. She wondered if he was happy. Deep down, she knew he was, because Ethan had always been the better person. One rainy afternoon, she sat alone in a dingy apartment, staring at an old photo of her and Ethan. Tears fell onto the frame as she whispered, "I'm sorry." But apologies meant nothing when spoken to an empty room. Ethan Blake, however, didn't need to hear her apology. He had long since left the past behind, embracing a future filled with love, loyalty, and the family he had always dreamed of. Some betrayals destroy, but others teach. Ethan's pain had forged him into someone stronger, someone who refused to let bitterness define his life. And in that strength, he had found peace. The end.